And for all veterans still living, including and particularly my good close personal friends, Douglas V. Gibbs and Alex Ferguson, thank you for your service. It is a privilege to know, an honor to serve with you in our current endeavor to resurrect the old American Republic, to sweep away what Barack Obama and the Democrat Party has done to it, and put America back where it's supposed to be, within the bounds of the United States Constitution. And we do our little teeny tiny part here on the Hard Starboard Radio Network to get to that point. Welcome, all of you, to the Hard Starboard Radio Network on blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. I'm your host, Jasmius, your ruler, your benevolent despot, and your fount and rabbi of common sense. Conservatism, Constitutionalism, and Christianity, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday. I should hasten to add, now that I think about it, especially now that, since I just thought of it, that I will be traveling this weekend to pick up a piece of furniture that is one of the last things remaining in my parents' house. And so, as per usual, when I'm traveling on the weekend, there will be no Hard Starboard Radio Weekend podcast on Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, or at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific, for that matter, which is when Hard Starboard Radio Weekend will air through the middle of December. But it won't air on Sunday at all this Sunday. It will air on Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, and then the live podcasts will resume a week from today, next Tuesday. I guess that would be November the 18th. So just mark that down in your day timers, on your calendars, put it on a Post-it note and attach it to your monitor. See, that's why, another reason why to click the follow button. Because not only at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network are there over 7 years of podcasts for your downloading pleasure, your education, edification, enlightenment, and entertainment in all your life's endeavors, but that follow button will tell you about things like what I just told you. When there is a modification, an exception to the standard 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific, Monday through Friday, plus the Hard Starboard Radio Weekend podcast at the same time on Sunday afternoons. So that's one reason to click on the follow button. Another is to, of course, continue to inflate my gargantuan ego, and of course burgeon even further the hordes of Hard Starboard Nation, but also to maybe, perhaps, put Hard Starboard Radio on the main page at blogtalkradio.com. Come on, get these mental glitches out of me. Oh, it almost makes me sound like Max Headroom, only less electronic, less artificial. By the way, guest call-in number 646-478-5068. Email address, jasmius@comcast.net. Lady Michelle's already in the chat room. Welcome to Lady Michelle. Because we would like to put Hard Starboard Radio on the main page at blogtalkradio.com as a featured podcast, right alongside another production of the Hard Starboard Radio Network, American Daily Review, a podcast which airs Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. It is the kickoff of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review, where, by the way, there are over 5 years worth of podcasts to be downloaded and wallowed naked in, so don't hesitate. In fact, you can keep this podcast going at this very moment. Open up another tab and go to blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review and just start a download. Those few of you who haven't already done so, of course. In hour number one, I'm joined by the aforementioned proud Navy veteran, Douglas V. Gibbs. And we go through and analyze and discuss the big stories of the week. All except 2 and 1, which we say for the third hour of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza. At hour number 2, most Saturdays, I'm joined by my good, close, personal online friend of over 20 years standing. From Indiana, the Hoosier State, Jennifer Crawford joins me. And we distinguish hour number 2 from hour number 1 by having a nice neighborly chat, as opposed to the hard-hitting analysis of hour number 1 of American Daily Review and the Saturday Afternoon Extravaganza. And we do that in order to distinguish hour number 2 from hour number 3, because in hour number 3, the hard-hitting analysis resumes, but it also switches venues from blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review to KCAAradio.com globally, KCAA AM 1050 FM 106.3 locally in the Southern California Inland Empire area for the flagship program of the Saturday Afternoon Extravaganza, Constitution Radio with this man. Ladies and gentlemen, if the Veterans Day edition of the Hard Starboard Radio Network is the most listened to podcast of this week, then guess what? The jazmiest cam footage of same will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/hardstarboardradio. And in which case, you will be watching me right now, well, a week from now, actually. It'll be right now for you when you're watching this. And you'll know what's going on the live podcast as we speak, Mr. Gibbs' entrance audio. Also, so subscribe, please. Also, subscribe to our other YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/American Daily Review 2, the number 2, to which each Saturday afternoon extravaganza is uploaded, typically by Sunday night or Monday morning at the latest. So subscribe to both, please. youtube.com/user/hardstarboardradio and youtube.com/user/American Daily Review 2. Thank you for listening. Yes, Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs, featuring the regulars, Mr. Gibbs, myself, Alex Gabby Hayes Ferguson, and I might hasten to add, Vietnam War veterans, so salute to you as well, sir. And thank you. And one or the other of the engineers, Joe. It's typically Bashful Joe anymore, but and of course a top-tier guest, whether national, regional, or local. The book of the week, the Constitution Quest question of the week, taken from a piece from the game, available at many retail outlets, including the original outlet, constitutionquest.com, where if you make your purchase of Constitution Quest, the board game, a great gift for Christmas, ladies and gentlemen, or even Thanksgiving, but especially Christmas, and you make your purchase before the end of 2014, you get 20% off your purchase. 20%. What are you waiting for? Go get it now. ConstitutionQuest.com. Put the discount code DOUG, D-O-U-G, in the discount field. 20% off. Come on, guys. What are you waiting for? Do it. And then, of course, stories 2 and 1 are the big stories of the week. Exclusive to Constitution Radio. It is a 3-hour program on 2 venues, 1 day a week. And we're going to make it a 3-hour program on 1 venue, 5 days a week, through the powerhouse flagship station, KCAA, which is now CNBC News Radio. No longer NBC News Radio, it's CNBC News Radio. That change I learned about that change this morning. Doug let me know, so I adjust my promoing accordingly. And what was it? Where was I? The 3-hour program, 5 days a week on 1 venue, plus replays on weekends to be fit to syndicated radio program. Speaking of which, while working several jobs over the past decade, Douglas Gibbs pursued a calling: learning the Constitution of the United States. He objectively researched, dissected, and obtained illumination from each and every word in that historic document. This calling led Doug into internet radio, the political pistachio radio revolution, which also now these days is the home of Constitution Study Radio. Sometime on Sunday, every Sunday morning, just go to blogtalkradio.com/political pistachio for showtime, where he spoke on political news topics of the day, all the while using those events to illustrate the wisdom inherent in our founders and the Constitution itself. A humble man, Doug was soon asked to teach classes about the Constitution and later to guest on other shows, and then on cable network news programs. Like Fox and Friends twice, like Sean Hannity, like Al Jazeera, like National Public Radio. It's hard to believe he was once turned down as a guest on a, quote, legal, close quote, show, because having someone without a law degree discussing the Constitution actually makes a whole lot of sense when you stop and think about it and what lawyers have done to the Constitution. And, of course, that's why they didn't want him on. Mr. Gibbs is gregarious, earnest, and masterful in his ability to use current world events to help us all better understand this most historic document, the defined structure of the branches of government within our republic and ourselves. Liberty Tree Media Group is proud to market Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs and also host our podcasts and live simulcast at both at libertytreemediagroup.com. When I know for certain that that's going to go live, I will tell you. I will waste no time. Spare no effort. Check out www.douglasvgibbs.com and his incredibly popular blog, due in no small part to yours truly, politicalpistachio.com. We don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we need is to get beyond the Thunderdome. You remember that song? Back Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome was back in the 80s. In fact, I remember that song was playing when I was in college and I was writing. You know how dealerships have The vans that'll come and pick you up when your car has been serviced and is ready for pickup. I remember being vanned over, or couriered over to pick up my car because it had been in the shop. This was in Pullman, Washington in like 1985, 6, something like that. And that was playing. The driver had the radio on to probably to KW3, KWWW. I think it was either Pullman or Moscow, Idaho. Pullman, Washington, Moscow, Idaho. And that was playing on the radio. It's funny how things you remember and the things that you... One thing reminds you of something else, which is another indication that I'm now 50. But it applies in this sense. This is something I don't know if I call it a pet peeve. It is at times, I suppose. But why does the right continue to look for its own Obama? Why do conservatives keep searching for a hero? I mean, it's like, conservatives hear somebody stand up and give a great speech, and they agree with everything that the speaker says, and they point to him and say, "We should draft that guy to run for president." But why? I mean, I've heard people that agree with everything I say. In fact, I know that all of you agree with everything I say. Well, except for Lady Michelle, am I talking about the Seahawks? But the world champions of professional football for another 3 months or so. But that doesn't mean that let's say a listener logs in for the first time to listen to Hard Starboard Radio or downloads a podcast, and they hear me speak on whatever the topic of that program is, and they say, "You know what? I agree with everything that guy says. He should run for president." You know what my reaction would be to that, or would be to that? Now I'm not going to go way out on a limb here when I say this, but ladies and gentlemen, I'm not presidential timber. I have never held elective office. I've never run for elective office. I have no desire to run for any elective office, not even for dog catcher or a seat on the county sewage commission. I would not be qualified. Just because you agree with everything I say doesn't mean I should be president or even run for president, although, it's the perks, I understand, are kind of nice, which is why Barack Obama, it's one of the reasons why Barack Obama is never going to willingly leave that office, never willingly or voluntarily going to relinquish power. At least I don't think he will, but I hope I'm wrong about that, by the way. But so, and this is what Charles Cook wrote about last Friday. Conservatives should stop searching for a hero. And his example in question, which a lot of people are talking about, in fact, the head of the draft Ben Carson for President Committee was on Constitution Radio a few weeks ago. And I remember I just grinding my teeth because while my respect and affection for Dr. Carson knows no bounds, I don't consider him to be presidential timber. He's never run for office. He's never held elective office. He's not qualified to be president of the United States, no matter how eloquent a spokesman he is, or how right he is on the issues. Being right does not make you presidential timber. Dr. Carson is a good and accomplished man, but why should he be president? And strictly speaking, if he does run, he'll be the Herman Cain of 2016. I just hope you're all prepared for that, because if Dr. Carson does run, he ain't getting anywhere near the 2016 Republican nomination, much less the White House. I hope you understand that. The 2016 race for the White House has already gotten started. ABC's Shoshana Walsh suggested the other day. And it looks like Dr. Ben Carson is first in the ring. Carson, Walsh records, first became a conservative star when last year he created a buzz at the National Prayer Breakfast when in front of an audience that included Barack Obama and Joe Biden, he spoke out about political correctness, healthcare, and taxes. And Barack Obama did one of those sly things where he sits like this. Those of you watching the Jasmius can see what I'm doing with my middle finger. My colleague, or rather, not my colleague, but Mr. Cook's colleague, Jane Nordlinger, likes to gripe that you should run for president. You should run for president. You know what that phrase really means? It means I agree with you. And they're not one and the same in actuality. Nordlinger likes to gripe that, quote, you should run for president, close quote, is uttered far too swiftly on the right nowadays. The injunction tending to follow almost every instance of public-facing conservative competence. A man has made an impressive speech full of critiques of which you approved. He should be president! A governor is doing well in a state that is usually run by the other side. Shouldn't he be our commander-in-chief? Well, in the case of Scott Walker, yes, he should! For pretty much all the reasons that are not true of Dr. Ben Carson. He is a Tea Party chief executive with a proven track record of conservative achievement, as well as taking on the left with a smile and a cheery wave. So, yeah, Scott Walker should be commander-in-chief. We have someone in the legislature who is fluent in fiscal policy. Let's remove him from his area of expertise and put him immediately into the White House. More often than not, it has to be said, this happens with minorities and with women. The tendency serving perhaps as the Republican Party's own form of affirmative action. Ooh. Toes curling yet, Dr. Carson supporters? If we could just parachute this gifted black man into a position of prominence, the thought goes, our image problem would be solved. No, it wouldn't. The closer that Dr. Ben Carson got to even the Republican nomination, you know exactly what the media would do to him. Remember what they did to Clarence Thomas? And that was 25 years ago. Well, by the time the 2016 election cycle is in full swing, anyway. Do you really think it would be less vicious now? Remember, Dr. Carson isn't authentically black because, of course, he's conservative, right? His proclivity is not entirely unwise, of course. Washington, D.C.'s insider culture is certainly a real problem, and the abundance of career politicians, there's nothing wrong with being in and of itself, with being a career politician, I hasten to add. There have been career politicians as long as the Republic has existed, or I should say as long as the Republic used to exist. And wannabe lobbyists does render substantial retrenchment unlikely. On occasion, we do need outsiders to shake things up, but there are talented political newcomers, and there are mavericks, and then there are rank amateurs and flavors of the month. Wow, it's starting to sound like the 2012 GOP nominating cycle. I remember that. Herman Cain was just one of those new flavors of the month. In fact, it seemed like in the fall of 2011, I remember this very well, it seemed like every month some new Tea Party wannabe flake, pretender, tilter and windmill just jumped into the race, and then they do a poll and they would show that person leads Barack Obama by 2 points in this poll or in that poll. It was true of Herman Cain. I remember that as soon as Herman Cain jumped into the race, and those of us who've been following politics and know anything about it, we're saying, Herman who? A pizza guy? Really? Who isn't Papa John? Doesn't have Peyton Manning standing by him, twirling pizza dough into the ceiling fans? And there was a poll that showed that Herman Cain was ahead of Barack Obama, like 44% to 42%. To which anybody who knows anything about politics said, so? What the hell does that mean? What the hell does that matter? None of it mattered. All these flavors of the month, everyone from Herman Cain to Michelle Bachmann to, gosh, I can't even remember them all now. Just on and on and on and on. It's like, oh, really? Just these people, none of whom had the remotest chance at the Republican nomination. All they did was just clutter up debate stages that had, how many people were on them? 9, 10, 12? It makes these endless so-called primary season debates, nobody knows what anybody said because you got too many people on the stage. You can't really determine or discern anything about those that are on the stage. And plus, everybody knows who the serious candidates are and who are just the flakes and pretenders and windmill tilters. And the flakes and pretenders and windmill tilters tend to be the Herman Cains, the Michelle Bachmanns, and God bless Dr. Carson. Again, I love the man. I respect the man. He's a better man than I am. He's a smarter man than I am. But you know what? He would be one of the pretenders, flakes, and windmill tilters. He would not be a serious candidate. I'm sorry. I mean, it's just that doesn't have anything to do with him other than the fact that he has not run for or held elective office at any level. The presidency is not an entry-level job. It's just the way it is, folks. It's not my idea. It's like the sky is blue. Well, nobody can really do anything about that. That's just the way it is. When you can actually see it, by the way. And the difference between these two types, talented political newcomers and mavericks, rank amateurs from flavors of the month, is the difference between a Dwight Eisenhower and a Herman Cain, or a Herman Cain or a Donald Trump. I mean, I forgot about Trump. Gee whiz. He's definitely got the ego to run for president, but he wouldn't be any more qualified than Herman Cain or Dr. Carson. Now, one would like to imagine that the prospect of an unknown's being held up as the face of a centuries-old party and a timeless political movement would set loud alarm bells ringing in the ears of those who characterize themselves as conservatives. That for so many it does not is troubling indeed, although what that indicates is what the Tea Party is, folks. Most Tea Partiers did not get involved in politics until after Barack Obama was elected president and started fundamentally transforming the country. And so a lot of people in the Tea Party movement got involved in politics for the first time. God bless them. I mean, absolutely. Go more the merrier. But remember, you got to learn something about what you're getting into. And the fact is that Tea Partiers don't understand, a lot of them still don't understand politics. They don't understand the way it works. They don't understand that idealism and realism are two vastly different things. You know, idealism is fantasy. Realism is working with the system as it is. You know, even if you want to change it into something idealistic, you can't do that until and unless you take it as it really is, because you can't change anything to what you want it to be until you accept it as it really is. You can't say, well, this is the way it should be. There shouldn't be professional politicians. There should be citizen politicians. Well, guess what? The citizen politician is a myth, and it always has been. There's never, ever been anything any such thing as a citizen politician. Just has not. Does not exist. Never has. It's like the Loch Ness Monster, Yeti, Bigfoot, Sasquatch. I mean, even in the sense of beef jerky, beef jerky commercials. The citizen politician doesn't exist. And because the Tea Party wants it to exist, they insist it has to exist, and then they put up people like Sharon Angle, Christine O'Donnell, Todd Aiken, Richard Mourdock, and they kick away winnable, one winnable Senate seat after another. And as like I said last week, the establishments, the GOP establishment's part in the tremendous landslide victory that took place last Tuesday was that they ensured that there were quality, experienced, professional candidates running for these seats who wouldn't kick them away with gaffes and saying stupid things. There were people who were experienced, they were ready for the offices that they were seeking. And guess what? The voters saw it, they recognized it, and they voted accordingly. As a rule, we are on the right like to tell ourselves that we are steadfastly opposed to heroes in politics. In other words, wanting our own version of Barack Obama. And that we are especially opposed to heroes who promise that their election to the executive branch will result in sweeping changes or in a post-partisan utopia. The United States, we argue, was set up in opposition to princes and to aristocrats, with the express recognition that politics will always be with us and with the explicit understanding that the influence of individual players would be strictly limited by the system itself. Long before anybody in the wider electorate so much as knew Barack Obama's name, this instinct was a virtuous and sensible one. But if we have learned anything from the Obamadency, it is just how prudent that conviction was. Somehow, however, the hope that a shining knight will come to save the Republic, or resurrect the Republic, remains common within conservative circles. Well, why? What gives? Now, Mr. Cook suspects that the impulse is in part the product of the way in which the right sees politics. Last Wednesday, Rehan Salam quoted Noam Schreiber's invaluable observation that unlike interest groups on the left, which tend to accept the transactional nature of government, many movement conservatives have a genuinely coherent worldview they want to see reflected in its entirety. In other words, purity fetishism. This is correct, and to an extent, Mr. Cook is among them. An ugly consequence of this, however, is that individuals who line up with a given conservative's worldview tend to be held up by that conservative as a rarity and as a savior, as an unimpeachable superhero who will not compromise in the face of identity politics or elite pressure and whose elevation to power will immediately stop the ratchet from moving ever more leftward. Now, those who doubt this should see what happens when one criticizes, say, Sarah Palin, Ted Cruz. In other words, so many on the right, so many in the Tea Party movement confuse ideology with strategy. It's like Doug and I. Doug says it, I say it's true. We are absolutely 100% aligned on ideology, on philosophy. We're both constitutionalists. We're both staunch. I'm a staunch Reagan conservative. But he tends to be more damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Hit him hard, hit him fast, hit him from every direction. I tend to be, let's recognize, get the lay of the land, recognize your strength relative to the other side, because frontal attacks aren't always the best strategy. Sometimes you got to flank your opponent. Sometimes you got to infiltrate them. Sometimes you have to pick your battles. You can't just attack constantly. You got to pick your spots. Pick battles you can win. Because the ultimate goal is not to win everything right now. The ultimate goal is to ultimately win. You got to have a goal in mind that's realistic. And, it's funny, as over the past year, I've been watching as Doug has moved more and more towards seeing the wisdom of my take on strategy. It's like I've always said. This goes back to a year ago in the Ted Cruz Defundageddon government shutdown debacle. And all I ever said was that Ted Cruz was wrong for pulling the trigger on Defundageddon a month too soon. If he had just waited one more month, let the public, which at the time saw Obamacare only in the abstract, hadn't seen the reality of it yet, let that reality hit and sink in, and then you would have had public support for a government shutdown over the debt ceiling increase, not over the federal budget. It's not a question of don't fight. It's a question of fight smart. Pick fights you can win. Remember your Sun Tzu. Don't attack your enemy's strengths. Avoid those. Attack his weaknesses. Because Sun Tzu, remember what Sun Tzu cared about? He didn't care about glory. He didn't care about anything else. He only wanted to win. And that should be what we want to do. Right-leaning politicians who differ on a few important issues, by contrast, are quickly dismissed as traitors, sellouts, fake conservatives, rhinos. To witness this process in action, consider just how far Marco Rubio has fallen in the affections of many who once greatly admired the man. Rubio, who has an impressive conservative voting record and a genuinely winsome character, erred on the question of immigration last year. Like I said last year, he was the face. He was the token Latino and thus made the face of comprehensive immigration reform a year ago. How'd that work out for him, by the way? Now, did this error transform him in the eyes of the Republican base into a fair prospect with some unlikable traits? Or did this make him an unconscionable turncoat who should never have been elected in the first place? For many, it's the latter. Because, of course, Charlie Crist would have been so much better of a choice, right? Sorry, Charlie. Now, this inclination helps to explain why Ronald Reagan is so chronically misremembered. The Gipper was an unquestionably great man who, like Margaret Thatcher in Britain, not only helped to turn around the prospects of his own country, but played a key role in freeing millions of foreigners who had been brutally enslaved by the Soviet Union. Won the Cold War without firing a shot. Cometh the hour, cometh the man, as the old saying goes. And yet, despite the common implication of those who revere him, Reagan was by no means a perfect president. And there is some truth to the common Obamunist jab that he would not get through a Republican primary today. For a start, Ronald Reagan compromised far, far more than conservatives at the time wanted him to. Remember Richard Viguerie saying, this Reagan presidency is already a failure. He said that in, summer of 1981? I mean, there are some conservatives who, like I wrote last week, have a lust for betrayal. They want to be betrayed. They don't feel like they're doing things right unless their own party or they can point to something that they can twist into an accusation that their own party is betraying them. They have a lust for betrayal. To the extent that some, even National Review, considered Reagan to be a failure. He signed an amnesty bill that cost the Republican Party California pretty much forever. It was a disaster. That's why Barack Obama, here's a preview of hour number 2 today of the Hard Starboard Radio Network. That's why Barack Obama is going to decree amnesty. I don't care what anybody says. He doesn't care what anybody says. He doesn't care if, as we talked about yesterday on Hard Starboard Radio, that 3/4 of the country, including a majority of Hispanics and Democrats, say no to executive amnesty. He's going to do it anyway. Because Congress, this incoming Republican Congress, no matter what John McCain says, is not going to pass comprehensive immigration reform, amnesty. And so Barack Obama is going to shove this down our throats just like he did Obamacare, and for the exact same reason. It will eventually put the Democrats in power forever. Beyond the possibility of anything like last Tuesday to ever happen again. Don't say nobody ever warned you. Ronald Reagan signed tax increases when he was bamboozled into doing so. He signed gun control bills. This must be more during his time as governor of California, including one that outlawed the importation of automatic weapons. And famously, he made deals with Mikhail Gorbachev that were slammed by many on the right as being little more than appeasement. It is all very well for conservatives to say, if only Ronald Reagan were president, but in doing so, they have to take the rough with the smooth, and to remember, too, that Reagan did not achieve as much as he did because he was a superman, but because he was part of a more general shift, well, but one that he set in motion, okay? Let's give him that much credit. All in all, the Reagan era was an expression of changed public sentiment as much as it was a product of an especially capable president, but it was more the latter than the former. At no point in Ronald Reagan's tenure did Republicans control the House, although they did control the Senate for the first 6 years of his tenure in the Oval Office. Despite this, he changed the country for the better and reset the ideological presumptions of the electorate for a generation. Perhaps more. Dr. Ben Carson is a remarkably accomplished man, and I am thrilled that he is on my side rather than my opponent's. Amen, brother. But not everyone who is remarkable should be given the keys to the country. And not all who are with me on most of the issues are ideally suited to represent me. A good man wants to run for the presidency? Fair enough. Let's hear him out. But perhaps we might cool it a bit before we build him a statue or give him the nuclear football. You know, it's not that, in other words, it's not a criticism of Dr. Carson to say that he's not qualified to be president. That's not a criticism. Very few people are qualified to be president, including the guy that's squatting there now. I'm going to try to get through these two items relatively quickly. Now, David Freddoso at conservativeintel.com has 7 takeaways, 7 favorable outcomes from the election that took place a week ago. I'm only going to concentrate on one and make brief mention of the second one because I think it's kind of interesting. And now, as I said on election night in my live blog of the election results at politicalpistachio.com, that the biggest win that took place last Tuesday was that Scott Walker was reelected again to a second term as governor of Wisconsin, because that was the key. If Scott Walker was not reelected in Wisconsin, there is no way that he could run for president of the United States. But now that he has been, Yes, he can! And, of course, Mr. Freddoso pretty much lays it out here. This was potentially, not just potentially there, Dave, the most important outcome of the night. We have previously called Governor Walker, the most underrated potential 2016 presidential candidate. Well, you know what? I recognized him. I've been on his bandwagon for the past year before there even was one. I said, how about Scott Walker? Scott Walker's perfect. He gets reelected next November. Walker 16. He only improved his credentials for that slot, the presidency, with his third convincing statewide victory in purple Wisconsin in 4 years. And by the way, Wisconsin hasn't voted for a Republican at the presidential level since 1988, in case you were wondering. Walker fits the bill well for a 2016 for a number of reasons. First, he has proven repeatedly in the arena that he possesses all the characteristics of a good political candidate. Speaking skills, intelligence, discipline, media savvy, reliable principles, and other basics like that stuff there. Second, Governor Walker, is uniquely positioned as a potential consensus nominee. I've been saying this for a year now. He bridges the divide in the GOP civil war in a way that no other candidate can. Conservatives on the national level love him already for the enormous and nationally publicized fight he had and won against his state's public employee unions. They like him because he went big after winning the governorship, taking on his state's unions and fixing its budget problems. Meanwhile, the party establishment would happily embrace him. He and RNC chairman Reince Priebus are close, reportedly. I hope Tea Partiers won't hold that against him. Third, Governor Walker is easier than some other candidates to protect from certain attacks. Most notably, and in contrast to several potential rivals, he was spared the pitfall of the Obamacare conundrum that many other Republican governors have faced because Wisconsin had expanded its Medicaid program more than a decade earlier beyond Obamacare's parameters. This was pure luck for Governor Walker. It meant he did not have to face the choice of either taking the easy way out by expanding Medicaid, as John Kasich did in Ohio or Chris Christie did in New Jersey, nor will he be attacked for depriving the poor of health insurance, as someone like Rick Perry certainly would. Also, in primaries, Governor Walker doesn't have to pander to the base excessively, something that has damaged other Republican candidates in the past, like Mitt Romney, for example. And finally, Governor Walker is likely to be acceptable or even the second choice for most GOP primary voters who back other candidates. Backers of other conservative and establishment candidates are likely to view him as an acceptable alternative, especially if the goal is to unite around someone in order to block a more moderate candidate. In other words, you just can't go wrong with Scott Walker. And I think if there is a 2016 election and if there is a 2016 Republican nominee, just picture on that stage, where is it going to be? Cleveland? The 2016 Republican convention? I think it's going to be in Cleveland. Don't remember for certain. I'd have to look it up. Wherever it is, picture the fourth night of the convention, the Thursday, and there are two gentlemen standing on that stage with their families and the confetti and the balloons falling from the ceiling and the band playing whatever they're playing. Hope they don't play in Madison, Wisconsin. Da da na 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 na. Da 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 na na. I hope they don't play that. I don't know what they would play. But picture Scott Walker, arm raised to the rafters, holding up the arm of Ted Cruz. Walker Cruz, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, first of all, that is a path to the presidency for Ted Cruz. He can't get there on his own. All right, he's burned too many bridges behind him. He's got to get his presidential cred from some other means, and that would be the way to do it. Would not Ted Cruz be the perfect vice presidential running mate? The hatchet man? Does anybody know the issues better than Ted Cruz? It would be perfect. You would be using Ted Cruz's natural proclivity to hamstring his own party and directing it at the other side. Can you picture a vice presidential debate between Ted Cruz and Julian Castro? Oh, man, would that be fun to watch, folks. So, Walker Cruz. Live it, learn it, love it. And one other brief mention here. Mr. Fredoso does not see Rand Paul running for president in 2016. If you like, you can add this to the reasons Walker has a decent shot at the GOP nomination in 2016. Republicans failed to take control of the Kentucky State House, coming up 3 seats short. This means that they will not be able to change the law that prevents Rand Paul from running for president and for re-election to the Senate at the same time. Were he to run for Senate, Rand Paul would be the clear favorite to win, but he would have to forfeit Kentucky's 8 electoral votes. Given the difficult Senate map from 2016 for the Republicans and the fact that it is still unknown who will be governor of Kentucky when that election occurs, it is hard to see how Rand Paul can compete at all. So I know this will crush all those Paul nuts out there, but don't expect to see the son of your hero running for president anytime soon. Coming up, ladies and gentlemen, in hour number 2, the Amnesty Extortion, or you might call it a Mexican standoff, and how Julia lost 1 week ago today. Hold on, folks. We'll be right back. Refusing to talk over the best bumper music in the Alpha Quadrant of the Hard Starboard Radio Network. Now, let's turn our attention to another loser from last Tuesday. That would be Julia. Remember Julia, the Life of Julia cartoon that the Obama campaign put out there in 2012? A woman who just was joined to the federal teat from birth and just never let go. Well, you know what? Last Tuesday, perhaps American women aspire... We learned that perhaps American women aspire to more than just receiving political patronage for their X chromosomes. See, this was Kevin Williamson in a delightful piece at NRO. Now, a funny thing happened in the war on women a week ago. Mia Love and Joni Ernst won Wendy Davis and Sandra Fluke lost. Feels good, doesn't it? The representative who will be the youngest woman ever to have served in Congress, Elise Stefanik, is a Republican who won a formerly Democrat seat. Not in Oklahoma, not in Texas, but in New York. Senator-elect Ernst is a 21-year veteran of the Army, Reserve, and National Guard who served overseas during the war in Iraq and who castrates pigs in her spare time. That's even cooler than gutting moose, like Sarah, or shooting moose, whichever. That even beats Sarah Palin's hobbies, folks. Representative-elect Love, a daughter of Haitian immigrants who came to the United States fleeing the Tonton Macoutes, is a former city council person and mayor of Sarasota Springs, Utah. Parenthetically, now there is love in the House of Representatives, folks. I love it. Can't you do that? I love it. Damn. There's my Sheriff Rasco Go Train impression for you for the day. The difference could not be more dramatic. The Democrats' vision of an American woman's life was best expressed in the Obama campaign's insipid Julia cartoons, in which a faceless, featureless, well, no, actually some of her features were very prominent, at every crossroads in her life turns to the federal government as personified by her God, Lord, Master, and Savior, Barack Hussein Obama, for succor, S-U-C-C-O-R, means help for those of you in Malaga, Washington, and support. From negotiating a salary to managing her pregnancy, for which she didn't need no stinking husband, by the way, Julia cannot do anything for herself. At every turn, she is reminded that she enjoys political patronage under President Obama. And the campaign's psychosexually fraught and insistently reiterated phrase. So much for the Democrats. And the Republican women of 2014? Well, I know it's not much, but they helped win wars and made new lives for themselves on foreign shores. They were women who ran for office on policy platforms, not on their uteruses. Wendy Davis came to national prominence after filibustering a Republican-backed bill that would have enacted some restrictions on abortion in Texas. Fighting with such modest restrictions has become a leading women's issue, quote-unquote, even though American women, like American men, broadly support policies such as restrictions on late-term abortions. Some 80% of Americans believe that third trimester abortion should be illegal, but only 19% of Americans say they could only support a candidate who shared their views on abortion, while 28% say that abortion is not a major issue to them, and about half say that it is one important issue among many. In other words, most voters are not single-issue people. And neither am I, folks. One of my problems with Mike Huckabee, well, one of many. He's a single-issue SoCon, and that's, there are other issues besides. Not that moral issues aren't important. They absolutely are, and they should not be abandoned no matter what GOP political consultants say. But they're not the only issues out there. That's all. Which is to say, for most Americans, including American women, abortion is not a make-or-break issue. And most Americans, including American women, hold views on the subject that are much closer to George W. Bush than to Wendy Davis. But Wendy Davis is a woman's champion for attempting to conscript women into support for a position that few of them actually hold. Democrats believe that women have a congenital duty to support Democrats, just like they believe that the same thing about blacks and Hispanics and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so being in possession of ovaries should naturally make a human being more eager to submit to hairy greed. God, that's a creepy thought. In fact, one would think the opposite would be the case. Quite frankly. Jessica Valenti, writing in The Guardian, makes this line of thought explicit. Quote, "In a way, female Republicans almost bother me more than their male counterparts. I can almost understand why a bunch of rich, religiously conservative white men, well, I guess the founders of Hobby Lobby and Chick-fil-A are, but there really aren't. There are very few rich, religiously conservative white men out there. Most rich white men are Democrats, if you will recall. But I digress. I can almost understand why they wouldn't care about the reality of women's day-to-day lives. They've never had to. But throwing other women under the bus? For what? Lower taxes? 3 minutes on Fox News in the 3 p.m. hour? It makes me wonder what is wrong with them." Thus, do the champions of diversity and women's autonomy reveal themselves. If a woman believes that perhaps Barack Obama and Harry Greed are doing the country more harm than good, if a woman believes that lower taxes are in fact a pretty important issue, well, that's not a disagreement. It's a sign that there's something wrong with you. Pro-abortion? Or excuse me, pro-choice? I'm conditioned to, when I see pro-choice, I automatically say pro-abortion because there's nothing, choice has nothing to do with it. You know, the left only allows one choice on abortion, and we know what it is, but this is not what Mr. Williamson was referring to now, is it? Pro-choice? Well, sure, but not when it comes to your politics. On that subject, the left is as anti-choice and ruthlessly conformist as it is possible to be. American women and other traditional Democrat client groups did not seem particularly eager to knuckle under to the left's demands for supine fealty in 2014. Davis not only lost in Texas, she lost spectacularly in a 21-point blowout, barely outperforming pro forma Democrat candidates for other offices who didn't even campaign. In Texas, as in the rest of the country, big cities tend to be solidly Democrat, but Davis lost liberal-leaning Houston and vast swaths of other metropolitan areas. She didn't even secure a majority of women's votes. And she lost white women by a 2-to-1 margin. But here's the punchline. I just love this, folks. Get a load of this. Wendy, in her own Fort Worth State Senate seat that Wendy Davis had held, and that she had abandoned or vacated to run for governor, that seat was taken over by Connie Burton. Now, who's Connie Burton? A pro-life Tea Party activist and Ted Cruz ally. That is the perfect postscript to the whole Wendy Davis's falsies saga, ladies and gentlemen. I first wrote about Wendy Davis at politicalpistachio.com this past January when she was concocting her cock and bull biography about how she struggled and she made sacrifices, but she stuck with it and got through Harvard Law School and blah, blah, blah. And she really did it by marrying a rich guy and then screwing him out of the cost of her college education, and then bailing on him the day after she got her degree. So let's just say it couldn't have happened to a bigger bitch. And her seat's taken over by a pro-life Tea Party activist and Ted Cruz ally. Oh, God really does have a sense of humor, ladies and gentlemen. Now, meanwhile, the Battleground Texas campaign, which used Davis as a fundraising totem to pour money into the real contest, potentially competitive state house races in largely Hispanic areas, well, that was a bust, too. Democrats lost every one of these races, and most of them were not even close. See why Barack Obama's going to sign executive amnesty? Texas Republicans, unlike their national counterparts, have figured out that the way to win Hispanic votes is to recruit good candidates and campaign like they mean it in Hispanic areas. The purported white man's party put up some great women this year. And thanks in part to the efforts of George Prescott Bush, remember him, is developing a deeper Hispanic bench. Hispanic Republicans won state house races in West San Antonio, 63% Hispanic, Kingsville, 64%, and Pasadena, 75% Hispanic. While the mostly Anglo suburbanites of Round Rock and Northwest Dallas also sent Hispanic Republicans to the state house. Maybe Mexican Americans don't want to be condescended to by politicians either. Just ask Mrs. Pistachio. Oh, you get an earful if you try to condescend to her, I'll tell you that much. Recruiting good candidates, or at least candidates who are not committed to remaking themselves into the cartoon version of Republicans offered by the media, makes a difference. What do we say in the last item in the stack? About how the establishment is the reason we had the quality candidates with which we picked up 9 Senate seats and a net of 2 governorships last Tuesday. Oh, and 12 to 17 additional seats in the House. Don't want to leave that out. It makes a difference, as does having a recovery summer that has now had more sequels than the Star Wars franchise. But there's something else at work here. Who do Americans want to be when they grow up? Do women aspire to a life like Julia's, or to one more like that of Lieutenant Colonel Joni Ernst? Would you rather be a sanctimonious sack of crap like Wendy Davis, or a happy warrior like Mia Love? Would you rather vote for a party that speaks to you as a citizen, family member, entrepreneur, taxpayer, etc., like a human being? Or one that insists you owe it not only your vote, but your obedience, simply because you have a certain configuration of chromosomes or a certain surname? It's one of life's little ironies that it is the feminazis on the party of so-called women's issues who, in the 21st century, still have not quite figured out that women are individuals and that there is more to them than the sum of their parts. Yes, it's coming, folks. It's coming. We've been warning about it here at Hard Starboard Radio and on American Daily Review and on Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs and at politicalpistachio.com for back in the summer when it first got on the radar screens of those of us who actually pay close attention to politics on a daily basis, that an amnesty executive order, illegal and unconstitutional, was on its way. And, and you might have wondered, well, why? Because Barack Obama first talked about it this summer. And he said the rumor was that it was coming if the House didn't pass amnesty before its August recess to go off to the fall midterm election campaign, the general campaign. That Barack Obama was going to issue an amnesty decree on or before, or shortly thereafter, on Labor Day. Either around Labor Day. And then he decided to kick that can down the road till after the election. Well, why did he kick that can down the road till after the election? Well, quite obviously, it was to give the Democrats some microscopic chance of actually saving their Senate majority. And of course, without the border crisis this spring and summer, maybe that might have conceivably been theoretically possible, but no. And of course, it wasn't possible. And the Democrat Senate majority was not just swept away, not just barely eclipsed, it was wiped out. It was an extinction-level event, my friends. 9 Senate seats. No, of course, let's not take Louisiana for granted. That's December 6th, so that's 3.5 weeks away. And as I pointed out many times, I've seen Mary Landrieu, the Democrat incumbent in Louisiana, pull too many runoff election victories out of her hat to take that for granted. So Bill Cassidy still has a lot of work to do. Louisiana isn't in the bag yet. But assuming that it is, just for optimism's sake, 9 Senate seats. And so, and as I've also been saying, losing the Senate is going to be, and now is, not an indication that Barack Obama is a lame duck. It will be liberating, and now we're seeing it. Barack Obama is extorting the incoming Republican Congress to pass comprehensive immigration reform, or he will just do it illegally by executive order. I like to put it like this, and this is how I put it at politicalpistachio.com this morning. If I can actually... I can actually bring it up here, because it really captures what this amounts to. Let me just get over here. There's one point. Okay, yeah, here it is. On Sunday, Barack Obama defended his decision to act on an executive amnesty order, and said he was not trying to circumvent Congress, but that he had been waiting long enough for it to take action. Oh, really? I must have missed the "if Congress won't do what I want, I'm going to do it for them" clause of Article 2, Mr. Constitutional Law Professor. In my obviously obsolete version of the founding document, Article 1, Section 1 says, all legislative powers herein granted, in other words, by the states to the federal government, shall be vested in a Congress of the United States. It does not say most legislative powers herein granted will usually be vested in a Congress of the United States unless the President of the United States loses an election and breaks out in tyranny hives. Now, Obama went on to say on Face the Nation Sunday, The minute they pass a bill that addresses the problems with immigration reform, I will sign it, and it supersedes whatever actions I take, Obama said on CBS's Face the Nation. And I'm encouraging them to do so. On parallel track, we're going to be implementing an executive action. Say, see? Red Berry isn't stealing Congress's Article 1, Section 1 legislative authority. He's just borrowing it for a while, until they come to their senses. You know what it sounds like to me, ladies and gentlemen? It sounds like a hostage negotiation, doesn't it? Or rather, a hostage negotiation after the hostage has already been shot through the head 4 times. It'd be a shame for anything to happen again to Article 1, Section 1, wouldn't it? And of course, we talked about yesterday about how the 3/4 of the American people are vehemently opposed to executive amnesty. 74%. Every single demographic category, majority say no to executive amnesty, including Hispanics and Democrats. No to Hispanic amnesty. Or Hispanic. No to executive amnesty. You're telling them not to do it. But, see, like I said, he's going to do it. He doesn't care what anybody says. It's going to be just like Obamacare. Just like Obamacare. The American people were absolutely vehemently against Obamacare, and Barack Obama shoved it down our throats anyway. He's going to do the same thing with amnesty, except guess what? This time without Congress. He's going to sign an executive decree. It will be illegal. It will be unconstitutional. But remember what his legacy is, folks. Separating, amputating, severing power from legal authority. He doesn't have the legal authority to do an executive amnesty order, but he's going to do it anyway because he's got the power. Rich Lowry wrote about this today. He calls it extortion as conciliation. Obama offers not to amnestize illegal aliens, provided Republicans do his bidding on comprehensive immigration reform. Now, in a fit of post-election modesty, Barack Hussein Obama is offering not to take executive action to amnestize millions of illegal aliens, provided Republicans do his bidding on immigration. It is extortion as conciliation. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie often invites comparisons to The Sopranos, but it is Barack Hussein Obama, who is making a tactic taken out of the HBO mob drama his major post-election initiative. His bipartisan outreach now ends with a pointed, "or else." This offer Republicans can't refuse includes the stipulation that the dictator will revoke his executive action in the event they pass legislation to his liking. Well, how generous of him. We should all be pleased that he isn't threatening Republican leaders with the release of compromising photos. Yet. Chicago politics, anybody? Obama's tack on immigration speaks to a president who is out of sorts and out of step, and who recognizes his own... Oh, no, you got that? No. No, Rich. He doesn't recognize his own political impotence. He recognizes his raw political power. He's going to do it, folks. This is not some futile gesture. It's not a bluff. He's really going to do it. He wants to lock his party in power forever, which executive amnesty of the magnitude that he's talking about would do. Texas would be blue by 2020 at the absolute latest. Just like California. The last amnesty, 1986, the one that President Reagan signed into law, and he was bamboozled into doing that by what? Promises that they would build a fence if we just amnestized the 3 million illegals that were here then. Now it's probably 20 million. But he got bamboozled into it. And 6 years later, California went blue for Bill Clinton, and it's been that way ever since. Texas would be the exact same thing. Texas would be blue by 2020, and then Republicans can kiss their asses goodbye. They will never, ever come close to winning another national election. Ever. I mean, in Texas and Arizona, and just forget about it. It's done. It's over. Utah would go blue. Idaho would go blue. Alaska would go blue. And that's what he's going to do. That's why he's doing it. That's the only way the Democrat... Because really the Democrat Party... I didn't have time to get to one item in the stack. I'll try to get to it tomorrow on the Hump Day Baby edition of the Hard Starboard Radio Network. It was from Bloomberg View about Democrats and those stupid voters. I mean, we've talked about all of the damage that Barack Obama has done to the Democrat Party. In conventional terms, the Democrat Party would be in the wilderness for a generation, conceivably. But not with what Barack Obama is going to do with an executive amnesty order. That's going to be how the Democrats not only come back, but rule forever. That will be the permanent Democrat majority, folks. That's why I say, last Tuesday, enjoy last Tuesday, savor last Tuesday, because that's probably the last time you're ever going to see a huge Republican landslide ever again. And it's because of what we're talking about right here, right now. Unable to build a political case for one of his chief second-term priorities, Barack Obama has to fall back on executive usurpation. But then he's got the power, so that's why he didn't really care about losing the Senate. That's why he went out there a few weeks ago and said, well, my policies are on the ballot, and congressional Democrats supported me. They voted with me. And I'm sure those Democrats who took it in the shorts a week ago were saying, oh, man, why did you have to say that? I think one of the reasons he said it was because he didn't give a rat's ass whether or not... at that point, it was pretty clear that deferring executive amnesty was just a matter of time. In other words... It didn't turn the election around. It wasn't going to save the Democrat majority in the Senate. So he just said that because he didn't care. He didn't have to care. Losing the Senate, losing Congress is liberating for Barack Obama because he's not going to cooperate with the Republicans. He's going to rule by decree. Congress is going to be an irrelevant ceremonial rump husk. It's not going to be the legislative branch of government. Barack Obama is the legislative branch of government as far as he's concerned. And we're going to see it with this amnesty decree. Prior to the election, Barack Obama delayed his threatened amnesty, legalizing millions of immigrants, aliens, because it might harm Democrats. Well, then he quickly decided, well, it's going to happen anyway. What do I care? It still became an election issue, though, with Republicans hammering away at it and winning resoundingly. That's what happens when you're on the right side of 3/4 of the American electorate. Even a relative dove on immigration, such as Cory Gardner, the Republican senator-elect from Colorado, opposed Obama's executive action. Well, hell, John McCain opposed Barack Obama's executive action. In fact, he said that just yesterday. In fact, what he said was, no, Mr. President, don't go the executive action route. We'll give you amnesty. Just give us a chance. He's been trying for 7 years, still hasn't gotten it done yet. And it's like I've been saying, I cannot believe that Republican leadership is going to commit political suicide by turning around and handing to Barack Obama that which he has been threatening to do illegally for the past year. Well, longer than that, really. Now, this electoral rebuke might give a less high-handed president pause, but not Barack Obama. He rules from an Olympian height above mere election results and mere constitutional constraints on his power, none of which he recognizes. The dictator says that he'd still prefer that Congress itself change the immigration laws. For him, this is a positively Madisonian expression of respect for the American constitutional scheme. Obama is distressed the Senate passed an immigration bill by a wide bipartisan margin and the House refused to take it up. Well, fine, that's his right. He has legitimate means to respond. For one, he could have barnstormed the country for amnesty during the election campaign, and the Democrats could have lost 18 Senate seats instead of 9. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is how legislative majorities are theoretically built. Of course, he was too unpopular even to appear in most parts of the country, except for Anthony Brown, the... well, no, he didn't get elected the governor of Maryland, did he? Let alone convince anyone of anything. With the election passed, he can still build the political case for an amnesty and pressure House Republicans to act. If he could turn up the political heat enough, he might make House Speaker John Boehner commit political suicide. But this is highly unlikely, given that the country is not up in arms demanding an even laxer immigration system, but quite the opposite, as we discussed yesterday. When it comes down to it, fiat is the only means, and well, illegal fiat, is the only means for Barack Obama to reliably get his way. His promised executive decree is a substitute for democratic politics, not an exercise in it, as befits the dictators of banana republics throughout history and around the world. He says we can no longer wait on immigration. But the reason that Republicans obtain so much leverage over the issue in the first place is that Barack Obama did not make it a priority in his first 2 years in office when Democrats had large congressional majorities. Other things were more important to him then. He preferred to wait. Now the Republicans too prefer to wait, or just say, no, we're not going to do that. He considers it an intolerable provocation. Because, of course, everybody in Congress, including Republicans, are subordinate to him, and they work for him. He is their imperial majesty, the emperor, and they're supposed to do what he says. That's how he thinks of it. So what? This idea that Congress is the superior branch of government? There's a reason why Congress's powers, the legislative power, is set out in Article 1 and the President's in Article 2, folks. No, that can't be the case. He's God! And you will all bow down and worship me! That's how he thinks of it, folks. It's just the way it is. No matter how frustrated the president is, there is no chagrined and impatient clause in the Constitution that allows him to effectively make his own laws when he is irked at Congress. Oh, by the way, how many presidents throughout American history do you think have been irked at Congress? I'm going to go way out on a limb and say, all of them! That doesn't uniquely or specifically empower the president to just say, screw you guys, I'm doing it anyway. If so, Congress would have been neutered at the beginning. American presidents have been irked at Congress for as long as there have been presidents in a Congress. When Barack Obama is threatening is not only politically graceless, a rude gesture to the public, as Ron Fournier of the National Journal puts it, it is a profound distortion of the mechanisms of American government. And it's, blatantly illegal and unconstitutional, and technically does not have the force of law for just that reason. but any political environment defined by the reaction to his ideological overreach and misgovernment, blackmail is all he's got. Yeah, it'd be a shame if anything happened to Article 1, Section 1, wouldn't it? According to Ryan Lovelace at National Review Online today, there is a plan to block the Obama executive amnesty decree, but it won't be easy. Yeah, well, I'd say it'd be bloody impossible power-wise, but let's see what Mr. Lovelace is talking about, shall we? When many Republicans were still celebrating the GOP's historic election victory a week ago, conservatives on Capitol Hill began meeting in private to develop a plan to stop Barack Obama's planned executive action on immigration. The resounding support of the American people at the polls last week appears to have given some House and Senate Republicans new confidence that they can face down Obama and win. I wouldn't count on that, guys and gals. Yet that doesn't even mean they'll necessarily get their chance. Republican leadership in both bodies may resist putting up the stakes involved. Establishment rhinos! Right. Isn't that what we're talking about here? Conservative members in both chambers want to pass a continuing resolution to fund the whole government with language that expressly prohibits using federal funds to enable any executive action on immigration policy, blocking funding, for instance, of work authorization documents for illegal aliens. Now, that sounds like a plan. I mean, that is Congress's primary power, the power of the purse. They do get to do that. If they don't want to fund, if a majority of Congress does not want to fund something, guess what? They don't have to fund it. And the president doesn't have the power to order them to do it. Separate branch of government, checks and balances. This is a no-brainer. A total, utter, and complete no-brainer. Congressmen will work this week on crafting a strategy to pass such a bill, and one working plan would have House Republicans include such language in a continuing resolution that's needed to keep the government funded past mid-December. Remember Ted Cruz was talking last week about don't pass a 6-month continuing resolution that will take out of the hands of for example, the 9 Republicans who got elected to Democrat seats in the Senate last Tuesday, take out of their hands the ability to determine government funding and plan the federal budgets in their own right. Just do a short-term resolution through the end of the year, and then it will be in the hands of the 114th Congress where it belongs. And in the process, don't fund anything having to do with amnesty. Again, that's a no-brainer. But according to Mr. Lovelace, such an effort will probably run into the objections of Senate Majority Leader, here we go, Harry Greed. Even if, well, go ahead, be my guest. Be my guest, Harry. Force a government shutdown after we kick your asses Make your party an even bigger pariah. Increase the stink to cosmic proportions. I dare you. There's no reason to hold back in this confrontation. Ha ha! Oh man, there's no reason at all. You know that that catchphrase of Scott Hall's when he would say, "Oh, you want it right here? I got it right here. Where? Right here." I'm not sure if that made the jazziest can, but you know what I'm talking about. Even if Republicans can persuade greed to agree to those conditions, there are a number of Senate Democrats they think would support the idea. They'll have to persuade Barack Obama to sign it as well. Well, bring it on. He'll never sign it, but bring it on. That is a government shutdown confrontation we can win. Yeah, I want to see the press try to convince the public that, oh, it's the Republicans' fault. You know, first of all, it's a horrible thing that the Republicans shut down the government. Why? Well, they opposed Barack Obama's executive amnesty, just like 3/4 of the American people. See where that gets them. Yeah, this is again. This doesn't require any thought whatsoever. I mean, it is that obvious. If greed refuses to take up an amnesty blocking bill before the existing continuing resolution expires, as one assumes he will, the plan is for House Republicans to pass a short-term continuing resolution set to expire just after the new Congress is seated, followed by a long-term continuing resolution in the new year that includes the anti-amnesty language. Barack Obama has indicated he wants to enact executive action, which he doesn't have the power, he has the power, he doesn't have the legal authority to do it, before the end of the year, so unless he gets cold feet about the move, which I wouldn't count on it, it's likely that the backup plan will not get in the way of his announcement. The idea, instead, is then to block the implementation of the dictator's executive action, which is apt to include deferred prosecution and work permits for several million illegal aliens. Despite the dictator's plan to act in the lame duck session, Republicans may have leverage to stop it. We'll see. This is absolutely a fight we can win, one GOP staffer says. Obama would become unmoored from reality if we passed a bipartisan bill blocking executive amnesty, and he just said, "Screw it, I'm shutting the government down, I'm passing executive amnesty, I'm king of the world," which is pretty much his mindset right about now. But getting to a bill, period, let alone a bipartisan one, won't necessarily be easy. Republican leadership in the House may so fear a government shutdown. Well, don't. Not this time. Not this time. But such legislation never reaches a vote. House leadership has instead floated the idea of passing a 1 year? A 1 year continuing resolution in collaboration with Harry Greed? Bleep that! So that Congress could focus on other issues in the coming year, an idea that isn't sitting well with conservatives, nor should it. There's a surging well of angst over the possibility of a 1 year continuing resolution to be locked in with greed. That would be stupid beyond belief. It may be easier for Republicans to take their stand against the dictator's announcement after the new year for a number of reasons. Well, you talk about not having learned a thing from last Tuesday. Jeez. A staffer with Idaho Congressman Raul Labrador says he doesn't think House Republicans would risk a government shutdown for any reason, including preventing the dictator's executive amnesty. Why? 3/4 of the American people are on your side, remember? It's why you won last Tuesday so resoundingly, remember? But there's another option. A Republican House and Senate can block funding for the dictator's planned amnesty with specific parts of the appropriations process. Even if we pass the strongest prohibition possible, the dictator is going to blow us off anyway, which is true. I think having some sort of condemnation in the CR is good, but the important thing is the appropriations process. If the dictator refuses to sign an appropriations bill for the the Commissariat of Homeland Security that takes aim at his executive action, then there would be less funding for particular parts of DHS, meaning much lower stakes than a government shutdown. In order for all that to work, though, he points out, Republican leadership still needs to come around. A one-year government funding resolution, as House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy has suggested, would defang the appropriations process. Yeah, you think? You think? You know, for 10 of those 12 months, Harry Reid would not be Senate Majority Leader, and yet he would have his funding levels. For 10 of those 12 months that he would no longer be Majority Leader. That is bleeping insane. Ted Cruz is absolutely right about this. Do not pass anything! And the lame duck passed the December 31st, 2014. Funding, that we've elected a new Congress, one that Republicans control. That is the Congress that should be making those decisions after New Year's Day. House conservatives are already working on winning support for their plan. Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks tells NRO the plans are still in an embryonic stage, but members are talking one-on-one and over the phone about how best to proceed. In addition to withholding funding for implementation of the executive action, he says, the House could expand its looming loss. Well, who cares about that? That could happen as regarding Obamacare to include any illegal conduct by Obama concerning immigration policy. Whatever. That could happen as early as before Thanksgiving, he points out, because it doesn't require any action from the Senate. And also won't matter a hill of beans. While no legal challenge to the executive action could be mounted until after the dictator announces the action itself, House Republicans could authorize the Speaker to file a lawsuit dependent on what the President does, Brooks says. Well, whoop-de-doo. Some think going to court is a distraction. Oh, yeah, well, I'm holding my hands up for those of you in the Jasmia's camp. A staffer for Louisiana Senator David Vitter's office, which is closely involved with the effort to block Obama's executive action with the funding bill, says the best option is just to take the executive action off the table, arguing that some Democrats will be up for it. After the midterm elections and the foundering of the 2013 Gang of Eight bill, Senate leadership will support the idea too, he contends. You heard so many people preaching about how Republicans have to do this immigration reform to be successful, get elected, win the midterms, blah, 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 the Vitter staffer says. But every single member ran against amnesty. Every single new member ran against amnesty and won. 3/4 of the American people, remember? Oppose executive amnesty. Conservative sources say they think an amnesty-blocking CR could get support from Democrat Senators Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, plus Independent Senator Angus King of Maine. And if the bill is brought up before the new Congress is seated, sources say that Democrat Senators Mark Begich and Mary Landrieu might add their support as well. If conservatives' effort manages to win over the leadership of the House and the Senate with some Democrat support, next year, Obama would then have to choose to veto the bill and shut the government down, or sign the bill and gut the implementation of his executive action. I think we know what he would do, but it wouldn't redound to our detriment. Incoming Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has explicitly ruled out that option for the foreseeable future, but some members of both bodies seem to want it back on the table. Why? Because we can win this time. What leadership thinks of the idea of using the appropriations process next year to block the dictator's amnesty, an idea also suggested by Senator Ted Cruz, and he's right about that, isn't clear. In addition to building a consensus in the halls of Congress, conservatives are looking to rally the American people in their effort to block Barack Obama's plans. County sheriffs, read Joe Arpaio, who oppose the idea, for instance, are working with congressional Republicans to organize a massive gathering of law enforcement in Washington on December 10th, 2 days before the existing government funding bill expires. Hint, hint. But Republicans know that public outcry and the thorough drubbing Democrats got in the midterm elections might not be enough to stop the dictator's amnesty plans, and it won't be. For that, there's the power of the purse. Getting to use it, though, is going to be tricky, but that's the power that the founders gave to Congress. And wow, there's that little time left, huh? Ha, ha, ha. Well, we'll be back tomorrow, 22 hours and a minute and change, for the Hump Day Baby edition of the Hard Starboard Radio Network. Join us then at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Networks. See you tomorrow.